You are listening to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast, hosted by Adam Jackson and Patrick Wilton. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Beltway Wars Invitational Podcast Show with your host, Adam Jackson, and back from his trip to Spain, I believe, Patrick Wilton. Good to have him back, as always, so I don't have to do this by myself. I don't know how much of Week 6 you really got to watch. What time did you fly back in?
We got back Saturday, so Dustin was at the game Sunday, and I watched.
Okay, so you got to see all the happenings of Week 6. Anything from the matchups that you saw? Any interesting notes before we get started?
Well, the interesting note for me is that all of the one-loss teams are now two-loss teams. My team, Jake's team, Brian's team, the Cheddar, the Warbirds, and the Cox all losing to fall to 4-2. All still the top three teams in the league. So the parity that you talk about every week, we have that here again. So 4-2 is now the best record in the league with six teams. Six teams at 4-2. So definitely anybody's league at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of parity. Only 2 1-5 teams. Everyone else still kind of in the mix. Even maybe, you get on a run. Maybe one of these 1-5 teams can sneak in at the end. But let's just get into it, as we always do, week in and week out. We start with the highest scoring team of the week, and that would be Josh, the Pasadena Plague, 146.46 to the aforementioned Jake, the Carlisle Cheddar, 139.02. Starting with Josh's squad, Trevor Lawrence, he starts here. He had Anthony Richardson again out. Decided not to go with Joe Flacco this week over Trevor Lawrence. That was a good decision. 17.06 points, 23-35, 234, 2 touchdowns, and an interception for a solid 17 points. Has to start Justice Hill, nothing at all. Really, the Derrick Henry show there in Baltimore, 1 carry, 2 yards, only 1 catch on the day. So I think the days of him being maybe a risky flex option are gone. And with Keaton Mitchell on the horizon, that would just hurt his workload even more. Najee Harris, 14 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown, 19 points in their win against the Raiders. Chris Godwin, 11 for 13, 125, and a touchdown in the absolute thrashing of the New Orleans Saints. Brandon Ayuk, still disappointing, still hasn't really gotten it going. 2 for 4, 37 yards on Thursday. Wan'Dale Robinson with Malik Neighbors being out, 5 for 11, 50 yards. George Kittle catches 2 touchdowns on Thursday night for 58 yards. Romeo Doubs, very sneaky flex play, with a couple. I think Latavius Wicks was out, or at least limited. 3 for 4, 49 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Bates, 20 points for Detroit and the Chargers defense. Looking on the bench, all it is injuries, really. It's injuries and buys. Pacheco, Devin Singletary was out of this one. Anthony Richardson, as we mentioned, also out. So, Josh quietly maybe going to 4-2 on the season. Not one of the main teams that we've been talking about in terms of dominant performances through 5 weeks, or through 6 weeks rather. Looking at his squad, it seems to be kind of held together by, duct tape and hope, and it seems to be working out so far.
It is, and I'm trying to think of a bold prediction for this team, because I feel like there's one buried here. I don't know what it is yet, but 4-2 for Josh's team to be 4-2, a couple weeks removed from being the lowest scorer and chugging a beer in front of his children in a trailer park. That is a pretty big rise. Started from the bottom. Now he's here at the top of the league in week 6. Really impressive. I mean, you mentioned it, the injuries. Richardson out, Singletary out, Pacheco on IR, maybe back in 6 to 8 weeks after his surgery. Could he get him back? This season, is he still going to be in it? At that point, Puka Nakua on IR. So like
Yeah.
tons of big names, and to be able to be 4-2, Chris Godwin, the number 2 receiver in fantasy, who would have thought that? Not much at the running back position, but Wan'Dale Robinson, like secretly there, like wide receiver 27, basically playing as a high-end wide receiver 3, giving you the production that you need. He's scoring between, 7 and 12 points generally every week, which is, you'll take that all day out of your, number 3 wide receiver position. And George Kittle, the number 1, I believe, tight end, right? Number 1 tight end in fantasy. So like he's getting production, and you called it. I mean, if you can get a little bit of production out of Ayuk, the guy that just got paid big money by San Francisco, you got to think that at some point talent and money is going to win out, and he's going to become a bigger part of the offense. Maybe once Christian McCaffrey comes back, it'll open the field up a little bit more for Ayuk. But this team is kind of staying afloat, and Trevor Lawrence, to slide him in a good matchup against the Bears, he scores 17 points. That's the kind of decision making that a fantasy owner needs to do to make the right, push the right buttons, and to be able to get a huge win. Romeo Dobbs, of course, Wicks hurt. Dobbs scores 2 touchdowns. You never know with the Packers receiving core. When fully healthy, they can run 4 legitimate receivers out onto the field. You get lucky here. You catch lightning in a bottle with 2 touchdowns on 4 targets for Dobbs. So everything went right for Josh, right on down to a 20-point kicker performance from Jake Bates with Detroit. So I don't know what the bold prediction here is, but like it's something along the lines of like if he gets Pacheco and Nakua back and they play this fantasy season, like Josh could win this league. I mean, he's holding it together, and he's got talent on this team. Just a lot of that talent happens to be hurt at the moment.
Are you at all concerned with this quarterback room? I mean, you have Lawrence, who is now the 20th ranked running back or quarterback rather, and Anthony Richardson, who has been disappointing when he's been on the field, only scoring over 10 points once, and that would be week 1. Is he a team that maybe you're looking for a little more stability from the quarterback position, maybe from the outside, maybe a waiver, a trade, things of that nature, or are you just kind of rolling with what you have?
I mean, for sure. I think just given that there's no obvious starter, I mean, of course, you hope that Richardson can become the guy you drafted. Certainly don't expect him to get benched unless he's hurt. The Colts, have a shot at the playoffs, but I don't think they want to throw. I can't see them benching Richardson for Flacco, but I think he can do what he's sort of doing, and picking up some guys like Lawrence, and you might look to the waiver wire free agency and sort of play some matchups. I mean, there's no obvious starter here, which to some degree it gives you some freedom to play with matchups, and he did that with Lawrence this week. He had a great game. Last week was Lawrence's best game of the season in week 5 against the Colts, and he follows it up with a 17-point performance against Chicago. Kind of moderate matchups looking forward for Lawrence. I think you throw Richardson back in there if he's healthy, and you just hope that he becomes the guy. Tough matchup at Tennessee this week if he is indeed back, as people are saying. But, I don't know. It's definitely concerned, but I think at this point, if you're Josh, you just have to embrace it. You're too injured to go out and make trades. You don't have the depth to be able to go out and find a quarterback. So I think you just sort of embrace it and take it 1 week at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I just think that that's the main weakness here from, is that going to torpedo his season, once we get later, maybe even into the playoffs. You're playing these tougher teams now. You can't, I mean, 17's fine, but you're really looking for that 20 plus that we always talk about out of the quarterback position to really propel your team forward. But let's go over to Jake's squad. Now goes to 4-2 on the season, 139.02. Jordan Love, was this his? I don't think this was his first game back. No, did he miss a game? No, it doesn't look like it. 25 points. 22 or 32. 258, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Really, he's playing really well. He's only quarterback number 16. He missed 2 weeks, 2 and 3. But, 16, 28, 15, 25. Kind of a little all over the place, but I think that, you're going to have more 20-point games than 15-point games going forward. Saquon Barkley really has a down day against a tough defensive line, 18 carries, 47 yards, in that really ugly game against Cleveland. Alvin Kamara, 13 for 40, a touchdown, does catch 5 balls for 24 yards. Now is questionable, seeing what he was limited today in practice, so something to keep an eye on. Garrett Wilson, 8 for 10, 107 and a touchdown, 20.70. So you'd like to see that, but there is news out of New York that could affect his value, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. He goes with Jalen Tolbert here, 4 for 5, 43 yards. That Dallas offense, I have no idea. CeeDee Lamb, is that like the guy you're starting? Maybe Jake Ferguson? I think that's you got to be concerned about Dak. Those are really the only two that you feel comfortable starting. Jalen Reed, 6 for 6, 28 yards and a touchdown. Always finds a way to get in the end zone. Also questionable. Not sure what his status is for this week. Kyle Pitts, 3 for 7, 70 yards, 8.5 points. Perfectly okay with this tight end graveyard that we're in fantasy football. Tyrone Tracy, we talked about Singletary being out on Josh's team. Has he emerged? 17 carries, 50 yards, and a touchdown, 6 for 6, 57 yards. So definitely a dual threat type of running back. The kicker for New Orleans group, 10 points, and the Pittsburgh defense, 15. Looking at the bench here, the interesting name to me, Tyler Algier. 18 carries, out-carries Bijan Robinson. We've been talking about this for, from last year. New coaching staff, there has to be something that they like about Tyler, because now it's 2 different coaching staffs where they seem to be a 50-50 split, even with Algier sometimes getting more carries than Bijan Robinson, 105 yards and a touchdown. And Jameson Williams, he has him on the bench, catches a long ball against Dallas, 16 points as well. So, goes to 4-2, loses this week in a kind of a heartbreak fashion, but nothing really to worry about here, except maybe Garrett Wilson now. Garrett Wilson, now number 9 wide receiver in fantasy. His value is going to change with Davante Adams now in the mix in that wide receiver room. How far does he drop? What is he now? He was probably a low-end number 1 wide receiver before the Adams trade. Now what is he? With the Davante Adams trade.
Boy, just listening to a little bit of fantasy analysis on my drive home today, seems like the preference is going to be Adams. If you had to pick one of the two, at least the guys that I trust and listen to seemingly preferred Adams of the two. I don't know that I've seen a fantasy team have so many changed circumstances in 1 week as Jake's team. And, that's the big one. Garrett Wilson, obviously, the addition of Adams. We should say Jake has Adams as well. He's on IR because he was out this week. So he's got both of them.
Right.
So that's going to be an interesting decision to make.
Well, you got to start both, right?
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Over Tolbert.
Yeah.
You're not going to be starting Tolbert. The other interesting side of it is, for what it's worth, Trey Tucker with the Raiders bumps up now from the number 3 wide receiver to the number 2 wide receiver behind Jacoby Myers, who's, not all that great, not all that special. Could Trey Tucker be at least a bye week fill-in? Mike Williams, a guy that we've talked about in previous weeks in terms of, is it going to be Lazard? Is it going to be Williams? Williams is probably droppable right now. Lazard is outplaying him.
Yeah.
Mike Williams got blamed by Rodgers for running the wrong route at the end of the game last night, and he's now the
Always what you
number.
want to see out of a good leader is blaming other people.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, he's probably number 4 in that wide receiver room. He's probably droppable. So you're not starting him. Jameson Williams uh, is startable. So I don't know. There is a decision here, right? Jameson Williams, Devontae Adams,
Whew.
um, uh, Garrett Wilson, and Jaden Reed. I guess you're starting all 4 of those guys. But as you mentioned, you're not sitting Barkley, you're not sitting Kamara. You've got Tyrone Tracy there. If Singletary is going to miss more time, Tracy is worth a consideration. Algier is worth a consideration. So lots of options here.
Hmm.
But who all of a sudden is not an option is Zach Moss.
Right.
Chase
Right.
Brown looks like he, much to my dismay, I just traded him away. Zach Moss, 6 carries for 13 yards and lost a fumble. Chase Brown way out carried him, outworked him in that game. He had a 0-point fantasy day.
Right.
So just a lot of volatility for Jake's team, both good and bad in certain situations. So he's going to have some decisions to make in the future, in the weeks that are ahead.
And even looking at his squad, it's like, okay, he has all these talented play, as you mentioned on the bench. You have Algier, you have Williams, things of that nature, maybe Trey Tucker. But I mean, my advice would be to try to package some of these players to try to get a high top 5 at one position kind of guy. But it's where are you gonna even put him if you do that?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
You're starting Adams and Wilson until it remains to be seen. There's going to be some volatility in terms of targets, just seeing how that shakes out. But you got to start them both. And then you mentioned Tracy and Algier. I mean, who are you starting there? Singletary's probably going to come back this week. I mean, maybe. How does that shake up? So I
Yeah.
think in 3 weeks we'll have a really good clarity on Jake's team. It's just, yeah, you're right. It's just a lot of things are changing, and Jake is the most patient fantasy manager of all time, still having Dalvin Cook on the roster. Very interesting there. Um, he sees something that the Dallas Cowboys and we do not, apparently, because he is still on the roster. I don't think he's been active yet. So um, interesting there. But 4-2, nothing really to worry about. We talked about all the riches that he does have. So even with the bye weeks coming up, he has multiple players he can just plug and play, and get good production from.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I'm just clicking on each one of these players. He actually has a very late buy schedule generally for a lot of his stud players. They're all kind of double digit, most of them double digit bye week. So, um, you almost want to have your buys right now when you've got depth and guys that are potentially playing. But so definitely going to be decisions to make, quite a log jam. Not a bad problem to have for Jake. He gets to play the matchups a little bit, but it definitely will be some interesting owner decisions that we'll be talking about for the next few weeks.
All right, let's go to our next matchup. That's going to be Dustin's matchup. The Pikesville Pink Pony Club now goes to 3-3 on the season, 139.72 to the Cockeysville Cocks now going to 4-2 on the season, 113.66. Starting with Dustin's squad, Lamar Jackson, MVP caliber season, I would say right now. 2026, 323 a touchdown, does throw a pick, but does run for 40 yards as well. DeAndre Swift, we wrote him all for dead sort of in the beginning of the season. Now look at him go. 3 straight games, over 18 points. This one has 17 carries, 91 yards and a touchdown. They seem to have figured out what to do with him in that Chicago offense. Kenneth Walker, 14 carries, 32 yards and a touchdown, but really makes it up in garbage time. I don't know if you watched any of that game, but really caught a lot of passes while they were far behind, 8 for 8, 37. Cortland Sutton, the only guy really there, 4 for 6, 53 yards and a touchdown. Drake London, my preseason, I guess he'd be on my preseason love list, continues to do well. 6 for 10, 74 yards and a touchdown. Whoa. My thing went crazy. Hold on. Technical difficulties. All right. Here. Okay, so we're at Drake London, 16 points. Keenan Allen, 2 touchdowns in this one. Kind of a sneaky play. I think a lot of people wrote him off, me included. Um, you know, Seems to be that kind of wide receiver in the red zone that he's always looking for. It seems like that's going to start developing there. Maybe not the guy, maybe the days of him catching 12 balls for 100 and, 27 yards are done, but it seems to be a reliable option when they get down close. Brock Bowers, 9 for 10, 71 yards, 11.6 points, and continues to be an impressive rookie tight end. Michael Wilson, 2 for 4, 21 yards, but does get in the end zone. So, kind of, I wouldn't say sneaky play, but lucky play there for Dustin out of the flex position. Santos hits 5 extra points, misses a field goal, and Green Bay gets 10 from his defense. Looking at the bench, kind of a disappointing guy, really, for me, was Braylon Allen. He's been really good, and just in this one, not utilized at all. Did have a touchdown called back, but 3 for 8. It looks like the Breece Hall show is starting to wiggle that back away. I thought it was going to be more of a split just because of how good he was, but nothing doing in this one. He did have Jefferson on bye and Ramondre Stevenson out on this one. So, very impressive. I know I kind of talked up Dustin's team a little bit, but just looking at it, where's the hole? You're going to get Justin Jefferson back, so you're throwing one of these wide receivers in the flex position. Just an overall very strong team that maybe in the preseason we didn't think was going to be that strong, really headlined by the resurgence of DeAndre Swift.
For sure, and this is a team that you can't sleep on. Now, after 6 weeks, Dustin's Pink Pony Club is the second highest scoring team in the league with 754 points, only behind number 1 Carlisle Cheddar Jake's squad by about 44 points or something like that. So number 7th in the standings, 7 in the standings, but second in points. So if it weren't for the first 2 weeks of the season, starting 0-2, losing by some fairly close margins for Dustin, he's now gone 3-1 since then to get to 500. Very dangerous team. You called it. Swift has been the biggest surprise after struggling out of the gates with 3 terrible weeks. He's now had 26, 19, and 19. On 60% snap percentage. So obviously very efficient, over 5 yards a carry, and 2 of those has scored in 3 straight games. So Swift sort of becoming the steady option that you hoped he would be, drafting him when Dustin did do that. And this is a dangerous team. London, 10 targets. Sutton gets into the end zone. Lundy gets into the end zone. Allen gets in twice. Bowers, 9 for 10. The volume in that offense, seemingly without Devontae Adams, could go up. Maybe it has a little bit of, I don't know. What do you think? That's a question maybe that I'm wondering about. Bowers has been so good. He's, as a rookie, he's tight end number 2. Do you think Devontae Adams leaving for New York is going to hurt Bowers? He's already getting the volume with Adams anyway. Do you think defenses are going to key in on him a little bit more as the most dangerous offensive player on the Raiders? Do you think that he might get double covered over the middle a little bit more?
Well, Adams has been out the last 2 weeks, and look at his last 2 weeks: 19 points, 11 points. So I think that's more of the same. Is he going to end up number 2? I don't really know. I think some of these other tight ends are going to finally figure it out. But definitely a starting option, definitely a top 12 option each and every week. Probably a top 5 option every single week, to be honest, just by looking at what he's done so far. So I'm not worried about that at all. Probably his ceiling probably goes up a little higher and his floor goes up a little higher. I think he's just more of a steady option now. Devontae Adams does demand targets. I'm more concerned with Aiden O'Connell being there. I'd rather have Gardner Minshew throwing the ball than Aiden O'Connell. I think that he could have one of those. He's going to have 2 or 3 games where it's just a complete struggle session, and that's really going to hurt Brock Bowers' value. But looking at it so far, I mean, 19 points, 11 points. I mean, he's really the tight end steal of the draft so far because he did fall in our draft,
Yeah.
and it's worked out really well for Dustin so far. So now at 3-3, look, like as you said, second in points, so looking very good for Dustin going into week 7. Now we go over to Brian's Conkeyville Cox 4-2. Another team 4-2 as well. On the losing side here, kind of disappointing weeks from a couple of players here. Kyler Murray, 22 of 32, 214 yards and a touchdown. Against a tough defense, I think that we don't give Green Bay its credit thus far about how good of a defense they actually really are. But, you're hoping that, with Kyler Murray that he's running the ball, he's getting it. If he does have a bad week, it's going to be that 15, 16-point week, not an 11-point week. Josh Jacobs, 18 carries, 62 yards. Also a guy that's kind of, been middling a little bit. Now running back number 21, I don't think anyone really expected that, especially with how the offseason went with their A.J. Dillon being out. I thought, he was a sure lock to be a top 12 running back. So just kind of disappointing there. It's Green Bay is kind of those reverse offenses where, Baltimore is run first and, things like that. It seems like Green Bay is pass first, and then they'll run the ball to offset the passing. So just something to keep an eye on there. Joe Mixon, I think this was his return, and the big return it was. 13 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. 2 for 330, and catches a touchdown as well. So, right back to form for Joe Mixon. Got a couple games off and right back to it. Jamar Chase, 5 for 6, 72 yards, with a touchdown that really changes his week. Deebo Samuel, 4 carries, 15 yards, 3 for 5, 102 yards, and a touchdown. Really, I mean, he's the other than Kittle, I would say, probably the number 1 wide receiver option there in San Francisco. Amari Cooper, who we're going to talk about in a second, 4 for 6, 42 yards, gets out of that hellhole in Cleveland. 3 for 4, 11 yards for Jake Ferguson. Better days hopefully ahead. But that Dallas offense, like I mentioned, is real bad right now. Rashid Shaheed, injured. I think he has a knee injury, misses practice on Tuesday. Did nothing in this one, 1 for 7, 11 yards. Fairbairn, 13 points, and the Chicago defense, 12 points. He had a couple people on bye. Jalen Wright and Whittington. Also, Jerome Ford went out of this one. Justin Fields, if he starts, I mean, is that a conversation we're starting to have here? 23 points. Now quarterback number 6. Kyler Murray's been kind of disappointing here. You don't know how long Marvin Harrison's going to be out. I think he had a concussion, I think. So without his top target, how does that look? He is QB number 9. But let's talk about Amari Cooper here for a second. Goes from a horrible situation with Cleveland, now goes to a great situation in Buffalo. I mean, how high is his ceiling now with the change in scenery?
I think it's certainly better, obviously.
Couldn't have been much worse.
The ceiling, though, I think the ceiling may be a little bit capped. Only because we saw, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, in the offseason they trade Stephon Diggs. And, I view Cooper like I view Diggs. And I think toward the end of Diggs' tenure in Buffalo, it wasn't great, right? From what I remember, they weren't really utilizing him as much as you would expect them to utilize a number 1 wide receiver. He was very frustrated. So it'll be interesting to see if that dynamic changes. Obviously that offense has been a lot more run heavy this year than in previous years. I believe I heard today that they are the 5th most run heavy offense in the league, which is kind of a strange thing when you've got a quarterback like Josh Allen. We'll see what it does to Shakir, how much Shakir falls off after this. But Cook has been a little bit banged up here recently, so I'm I'm not really sure what to expect out of Cooper. I think his ceiling though could be a little bit capped. I don't think he's going to be valued like, for instance, Devontae Adams is right
Mhm.
now with the Jets. I think Cooper's ceiling is perhaps a little bit capped.
I think I'm a little higher on Cooper than you would be, and this is where my bold prediction is going to come into play, just at least for next
Mm.
week. He's next week. My bold prediction is that Cooper has his season high in yards and he catches a touchdown
Wow.
against Tennessee. Very suspect team. I think they're going to, really want to feed him the ball like they should have with Cleveland. He's very talented. He doesn't complain. I haven't heard anything out of Amari Cooper really. Not a diva, just gets in there and works. So I believe that they're going to feature him heavily, and he has something to prove here that he's not done. Um, at age 30, that's when wide receivers start to fall off a little bit. I think that he's going to have a big game in his debut against the Bills, or against Tennessee. Season high in yards and one touchdown is my board prediction for next week.
Okay, so let's make a board bet here. His high in yards is 86,
Yes.
and that was in week 3 against the Giants. So you set the line. I'll give you an over or under. Do you want to set the line at 86, and I'll take the I would take the under on 86.
Okay, I'll take the over. Well, I mean that's my bold
Okay, there
prediction,
we
so
go.
that's my
All
bold
right.
prediction. So
Well, I will take the under on 86 yards there for Cooper. Um, Something I wanted to point out here, you mentioned Kyler Murray and uh, Justin Fields, and whether or not that's a discussion. Yeah, Justin Fields, the number 6 quarterback in fantasy, kind of quietly. When I clicked his name, I wasn't expecting to see a 6 there, but he is the number 6, and
well, hold
he's
on. So
doing it,
1 second. So according to RotoWire, he's expected to lose his starting gig.
which is wild, right?
Yeah, I mean he's a better
Which is kind
fantasy
of wild.
quarterback than an NFL quarterback, I would say. Um,
I mean, but the Steelers, like, yeah, perhaps. What's their record now?
they won
Are they
this
four and
week.
two?
They're 4-2. Yep.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. Can you really bench a guy after you're 4-2? Like,
I mean he
I'd
has
be
5 rushing
surprised.
touchdowns.
He does. And if you well, that's the thing. I mean, if you look at Kyler Murray's rushing attempts, which both of these guys are dangerous on their legs. Kyler Murray, 3 weeks of 5 attempts and two
Yeah,
weeks of 7 attempts.
there's just nothing.
Then you look at Fields,
Yeah, I know.
and you've got 14, 8, 6, 10, 6, 11.
Yeah,
So like Fields is vastly out carrying Kyler Murray. Um, Kyler Murray's really volatile. I mean,
yeah,
you were hoping that this would be the year, and I know you really liked Murray. You
yeah.
wanted me to take Murray over Burrow, but like Murray just continues to be this inconsistent fantasy quarterback. I mean, he'll have great weeks of in the 20s, and then he'll have a bum week with like 11 this week against the Packers. His upcoming schedule: 4 deep red matchups: Chargers, Dolphins, Bears, Jets. Deep red obviously means probably top quarter of the league when it comes to quarterback scoring points. So some very good defenses against quarterbacks coming up. Fields, a tough one this week against the Jets, but then has the Giants, a bye, and then the Commanders, and then Baltimore. So I don't know. It's at least a question,
Right.
right? It's at least a question.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like Kyler Murray is like trying to prove that he can throw the ball. Whereas like Justin Fields ain't worried about that. He's just worried about getting yards. So like he's more like inclined to just, take off and run. Now, there's probably more designed runs for Justin Fields than I would say Kyler Murray, but it seems like Murray's just trying to sit back there and throw where, he's he's fast. He's very talented with his legs and he just doesn't seem to be using it this year. You know, only 7 attempts for 14 yards in this one. In week 5, 7 attempts for 83. That's what you more want to see out of him. But it just doesn't seem like it. 5 attempts, 5, 5, 1, 7. Like, you want to see double digit kind of carries, kind of like Lamar or Justin Fields, for him to have real fantasy value. But at 4-2, you know, through 6 weeks, that's perfectly fine, near the top of the BWI Warriors Invitational. And we'll see how that starting quarterback room really shakes out next week if Fields does lose his job. That'll be something very interesting to see. But
Yeah, we should point out too though the injuries on this team and the changes in circumstances. A couple here. I think you mentioned it. Shaheed, a day ago, the report is that he's going to be week to week, so I think he's fully expected to miss this coming week. I believe they play on Thursday, so there's a very slim possibility that he is out there. Brian Robinson missed this game. Not really sure. I mean, it was kind of a game time decision against the Ravens in week 6. He did end up being ruled out before that game. Hopefully for Brian, he's able to come back in week 7. He is going to have the Carolina Panthers, so one of the best matchups for running backs. You hope to get him back to throw into your flex spot. And then Jerome Ford is going to be considered week to week as well. And of course, that situation complicated by the fact that you have Chubb potentially coming back this week. So Jerome Ford's fantasy relevance, you could see him on the waiver wire very soon if Chubb comes back and looks to be at full strength. Ford, with the injury and with Chubb coming back, certainly looks like he may not be useful anymore. So, but Brian's team is really deep. So all he needs is really one of these guys to play. He's got a couple other options on the bench, including Jordan Whittington and Juwan Jennings, that could be thrown into a flex spot if need be. So enough depth to overcome these injuries.
All right. So, yep, third place. So nothing really to be concerned about. Just I would say that starting quarterback, just something to keep an eye on going forward for Brian. Let's go over to one of our closer matchups of the day. We had a lot of close matchups, actually, but one of our closer matchups here, which really came down to the wire, that would be Charlie versus Scott. The Reisterstown Rockets goes to 4-2, 133.60 to 130.80. Westminster Wonder Boys goes to 2-4 on the season. Let's start with Charlie's squad. The carousel, we love talking about quarterbacks. The carousel of quarterbacks here starts Kirk Cousins, and he had to. Sam Darnold was on bye, but really disappointing day. Only 12 points, 19 for 30, 225 yards and a touchdown. Very up and down. And Carolina, as you were mentioning, plus matchup. Probably can't get a better matchup than that. Really disappointed with only 12 points. J.K. Dobbins, though, really came back here. A couple disappointing weeks, but 25 carries, 96 yards and a touchdown. He seems to have distanced himself away from Gus Edwards and all other suitors. He is the number one running back for, a team that plays people close. So he's going to be used. He can be used in the backfield as well. But the next running back here, Derrick Henry, 24 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Really, my goodness, if you're drafting today, top 5 pick, probably. Just completely, it's so funny. I've never witnessed, and the Tennessee fans will say this, that I've never seen a running back get better in the fourth quarter. It's just people cannot tackle him or don't want to. They just throw their arms out there and try to go low, and he just throws them off. It's crazy, but continues to have a monster campaign in 2024. Now the number 1 ranked running back in fantasy football. Devontae Smith comes back here from his injury, 3 for 464 yards and a touchdown. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 5 for 9, 53 yards. Alan Lazard, again, where the situation is changing, but 6 for 7, 114 yards and a touchdown. You were definitely right on that between him and Mike Williams. Dalton Kincaid, 6 for 7, 51 yards, 8 points. Javonte Williams really struggles. 6 carries, 23 yards. It's so fun. It's like Denver can't run the ball. They can't. It doesn't matter who it is. They just cannot run the ball. So basically all of the Denver running backs are pretty much useless right now until someone really gets out of the pack there. It's really like a 3-headed monster there in Denver, or 3-headed chicken or something. It's not even a monster because it's not scary. Chris Boswell, 19 points, looked really great, and Atlanta with 6. Looking at his bench, does have Jonathan Taylor out at this one, Cooper Kupp out, Jacoby Myers out. Sam Darnold will bye. So, weapons in the wings, I think, is really the story for Charlie. He's going to be getting these people back fairly soon. Jonathan Taylor, not exactly sure when he will be back. Let's see what the news says on him. Nothing new yet. Still is the ankle injury. Cooper Kupp could return week 7. So could return this week. Jacoby Myers, his value definitely skyrockets after Adams. Not sure what's going on there. He was inactive last week. But again, it's hard to harp on this, but like the quarterback, he's 4-2, so it's like not. I mean, it hasn't really bit him yet. But these quarterbacks that are only scoring 12 points, and like you mentioned in your bowl prediction a couple of weeks ago, trying to find which one to start is going to be a week in and week out problem for Charlie.
Yes. Sorry, say that last part again. I was looking up something for my bold prediction. I didn't hear that.
No,
last
Charlie,
bit of it.
trying to pick which quarterback to start week in and week out between Cousins and Darnold is really going to be a struggle for him, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Darnold at this point has shown me enough that like I'm fairly comfortable with him at this point. Granted, he did have a very poor performance in week 5 against the Jets, but other than that, he's been pretty solid. And he's got TJ Hawkinson coming back, so adding a weapon there for Darnold certainly is a good thing. Cousins, just 12 fantasy points this week. He has been up and down. I mean, it was really that week 5. Aside from week 5, he only had one other game over 12 fantasy points. So, but does have, I mean, looking at his matchups, he does have some favorable matchups on the schedule. So I could see it. I think my lean would be Darnold generally. But you might find 1 or 2 weeks in the rest of the year where you'd go Cousins based on the matchup differential, for sure. The bold prediction I was going to look up. I think this is probably.
You're in love with Charlie's team, aren't you? It's like your 2 bold predictions have been Charlie's team.
What was my last one?
It was whoever he picks to start is going to score lower.
This is more of a season-long bold prediction,
okay.
Which I know doesn't help you with the pulling clips for the next show.
Thank you so much.
I'll try to think of another one, but this is out of left field, but Derrick Henry, NFL MVP.
Whoa.
Like,
dude, there's no more dominant player on the field right now. Like, can you?
I kind of think so. I mean, to do what he's doing when everybody knows that when he's on the field, he's getting the ball. I mean, he's not playing a gazillion % of snaps. He's playing like 60% of the snaps, 50 or 60% of the snaps, I think.
Which is even crazier because when he's in, they know he's getting the ball and it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. He's playing between 50 and 65% of the snaps, basically. He's got over 130 yards in half of his games. He's got touchdowns in every single game. That's what, eight on the year. He's in the top 10 at running back in 5 of 6 weeks. He's got over 25 fantasy points in 3 of 6. He's got over 10 in every single game. I mean, to your point, like if you're saying you draft him as a top 5 fantasy pick, like I feel like he should be in the running for NFL MVP at this point. I mean, the last time a running back won MVP was 2012, Adrian Peterson, age 27. I mean, Derrick Henry's 30, so that's.
Well, 30 is usually the drop off, but now it's not with him. He's a different beast.
He's a different beast, and kudos. I mean, look, Henry has been Charlie's ride or die for a very, very long time, multiple seasons. Now with the Ravens, it makes it even more fun to watch. He's just a monster, and like he could carry Charlie to a championship. Who knows? I mean, 4-2. He's sitting here, with Dobbins, who's outperforming his ADP. He's sitting here with, guys like Lazard, that are like putting up big fantasy days. He's got a ton of injuries that you mentioned. You get Taylor back, you get Cup back, you get Myers playing there now as the number one wide receiver for Oakland. You get Nico Collins, who's on IR.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
this is a scary freaking team. And I feel like I've said that about a bunch of teams that we've already talked about.
Well, we
It
talked
just
about a
goes
lot
to
of
show
4-2
you.
teams, so yeah.
Yeah, we have, and that's, I mean, hey, like it's wide open. I love a lot of these teams right now that we've talked about. So
Yeah.
big win. I mean, to get a win like this, but 3 point win with all those guys hurt, like that's awesome.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
awesome.
you can basically book, you're getting a touchdown from Derrick Henry every single game. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, through 6 weeks, it's been true, and you know, touchdowns are the gold mine of fantasy football. Even the first week, which was his worst week, still scores 10 points. That's you'll take that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's going to win MVP. I think that his yardage does need to go up. I think he needs to go around like that, CJ2K to get consideration for the MVP, and obviously needs to stay healthy. It'll be interesting, and Derrick Henry's going to get his whatever, but it will be very interesting what happens when Keaton Mitchell comes back, because I think he will have a role. Now, does that really hurt Derrick Henry? I'm not sure, but I mean, he impressed last year. He looked great, and he's the perfect complement to Derrick Henry. He's that slasher guy, the speed guy out of the backfield, things of that nature. So it'll just be, we're still a couple weeks away. I think it's like mid November that he's possibly going to come off the pup list. But just something to keep in mind with your bold prediction. Now go right over to Scott's team. Really a heartbreaker here. Really, really would have loved this win. Josh Allen does, what he could here. 2 touchdowns through the air, 215 yards. Does run one in as well. Really vintage Josh Allen back. Had a couple, had a 14-point game and a 7-point game the last 2 weeks. Really back to form here. Bijan Robinson has a good game here. Okay, I'm not saying he didn't, but only 15 carries, 92 yards and a touchdown. The efficiency is there, but it's kind of like from Derrick Henry from the first week. Only 15 carries with a guy that's this talented. I just don't get it, and we'll talk about that in a second. Tank Bigsby, you gotta stay away from this Jacksonville backfield. You have no idea who's it gonna be. I mean, I was high on Travis Etienne. That has been a complete bust. Tank Bigsby does nothing here. The third running back was probably the most.
yeah, Dearness Johnson.
Yeah,
Yep.
Dearness Johnson, who used to be a part of Cleveland,
Brown.
but
Yep.
he really didn't do anything either. So it's just really a mess back there right now. That whole offense is trying to find its identity. Probably, if we were to see another coaching change, I could see that this is going to be it. There in Jacksonville, Tyler Lockett quietly having a good year, 4 for 8, 65 yards and a touchdown. Now, wide receiver 32. I thought he was having a better year than that, but consistent 7, 8, 9, 14. Still has a role in that offense. Terry McLaurin, my goodness, he actually has a quarterback that can actually throw to him. 6 for 7, 53
Yep.
yards and a touchdown. Had a beautiful touchdown catch on that second one. Brandon Stevens was all over him. Still comes down with the ball. Jared Judy, another guy to talk about. With pieces on the move, does his role expand? I don't know if it helps him any, but his role you would think would have to expand there with all those targets now going to Buffalo. Sam Laporta, 1 catch, but 52 yards and a touchdown. The number 1 tight end last year, number 15 now, so obviously been a big disappointment for Scott. Ray McLeod, 3 for 4, 30 yards, does lose a fumble. The kicker for Green Bay, 11 points, and Houston with the big 15 points. Looking at his bench, Michael Pittman, he decides not to start him here. Michael Pittman
Yeah.
or Jared Judy over Michael Pittman is a questionable play, I would say, especially with
Ray McLeod over Pittman.
yeah, that's true as well. Even Coleman, I mean, I know he didn't do much in this one, but That's something that's kind of a head scratcher. Rasheed White was out of this one. Zach Charbonnet, behind Kenneth Walker, and Tyler Conklin doesn't really do much here. But I want to talk about a couple things here first. Bijan, eighth running back, so you like that. But would he be the number one running back if Tyler Algier wasn't there? Like, would he be the number one? Would him and Derrick Henry be 1 and 1A if Tyler Algier wasn't stealing 18 carries, a week from him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that granted, 18 is the outlier. It's normally 6 to 9,
Right.
typically. But what's fascinating, and it's like you can't be mad at the Falcons because they're 4-2. They just scored 38 points. Algier is his last 5 game. I'm sorry, every game except for week 5, he's over 5 yards. Well, he's over 4.5 yards a carry. So like, he's and we saw this a little bit last year with him. Like he's looked good. So like you can't fault them for they're 4-2, likely looking at potentially right now they're leading their division. You want to keep your best player in Bijan Robinson healthy, so you can't fault the Falcons for doing it. But yeah, I mean they've got the talent in that backfield with that combination of guys that they're able to give him only 15 carries in this one. Still pretty did a lot with it, and he had a nice fantasy day. But I you can't be mad about it. I
But
think
like,
he's still going to be good enough. He may not return quite the value that you're hoping for. In that sense, he's a little bit of a disappointment, but still, I think doing plenty enough to, to be one of the leaders on this team. The number 8 running back in fantasy, just a little bit lower than where you draft him.
just the concerning thing for me for him. Week 1, 89% snap count. Second week, 75. Third week, 82. 64, 67, 56. It's trending in that wrong direction. And he's just so talented. You just don't understand why they don't give him the ball more. I just don't get it. And it has to be frustrating for Scott. If he does get 20 carries, maybe he does win this week, only losing by 3. If he does get 20 carries, he might have won this week against Charlie. The next person I want to talk about is Jared Judy, the start. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit. I could see what you're thinking if Richardson is starting with Pittman. I can see like the logic behind it because it's either boom or bust for Pittman when Richardson's in. But with Joe Flacco, he's looked great. So I don't really understand the thought there.
Yeah.
In terms of starting him, you drafted him high. I think he's kind of like you have to ride or die with him. Really, I think it was one of the first wide receivers that he took in the draft. So I think that you have to kind of just hope for the best when Richardson does return. But Judy's value is going to go up now with Cooper gone. They have to throw to somebody. They do have Elijah Moore there. It's going to be him and Judy. So just kind of a head scratching call there from Scott.
Yep.
And it really cost him the matchup really because he only lost by 3.
It did, yeah. And the thing about Judy that's interesting, and I heard another stat about the situation with Amari Cooper in Cleveland. Amari Cooper, I think I heard that he is the 7th most targeted, has the 7th most targets of any wide receiver in the league and is the 39th ranked fantasy wide receiver in our league. So that just proves how bad Watson has been,
Yeah.
is that the number 1 guy there, it's so inefficient. His targets are so, he's rarely he's not accurate enough to make these guys efficient. And so I'm curious to see, it could be a little bit of fool's gold here. Judy will get more targets, but the efficiency has been so bad in Cleveland. Nick Chubb is coming back. You got to think that maybe they're going to rely on the running game a little bit more. So I'm not sure how much of an upgrade it is for Judy to become the quote unquote number 1 receiver. I think you get maybe a little bit of a bump, but not as big of a bump as you might expect there in Cleveland.
I think
The guy
that,
really,
well, just one point on that.
yeah,
Trading away Cooper signifies that they're giving up on the season. You don't trade away
yeah,
him
yeah.
if you're not saying, hey, we're just kind of seeing what we have. I could see Jameis starting soon. And
You'd hope that. You'd hope for that.
And if Jameis starts, he does not care about throwing interceptions. He will give you a chance to get the ball. We saw it with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin when he was in Tampa. So I think that could be the saving grace, really, for Jerry Jeudy. With Watson now becoming the backup and Cooper leaving, I think that he could have a big role, but you need that second domino to fall. And I'm not sure the Browns are ready to do that just yet. I'm seeing if there's any news on that. It says the NFL is still investigating Deshaun Watson. That's the last update there. But that's what Scott's hoping for. Because then, if you have Jameis starting and with Cooper gone, that's a conversation you're going to have where do you throw him in that flex spot in that starting lineup?
For sure. And, Scott's not out of this. You talked a little bit earlier about how any of these 2 and 4 teams or even 1-win teams can get back in it. It's not been all bad for Scott here. Terry McLaurin, since week 2, has been one of the best fantasy receivers in the league. Double digits in every week for the past 4 weeks. He gets Carolina next week, so obviously could be continuing his streak of double-digit performances. He clearly is a weapon, and Daniels is clearly a quarterback that can find McLaurin in that offense. Sam Laporta continues to kind of have a mixed bag. He did have his best game of the season. He scored for the first time on the year in that Detroit victory over the Cowboys, that 47-9 whooping that they did. You hope that he gets more than one target. Yeah. They score 47 points and only target Laporta once, so that's concerning. But definitely the potential is here. If Tank Bigsby, it looks like based on sort of the situation that Scott has at the running back position, probably one of the slimmest teams in the league with Rachaad White missing this game. And clearly now that could be a 3-headed backfield after what we saw this previous week with White out. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Tampa Bay said, Rachaad, why don't you take it easy a little bit? Come back at your own pace. We got things locked down with our backfield while you're away. He needs one of these guys like Charbonnet or Bigsby to come out and, maybe a Walker injury, which is not something that we haven't seen before, to get Charbonnet back in there, or Bigsby to this was a big week for Bigsby. He had a real opportunity and he sort of blew it. He only gets 7 carries. The Jags were down big to Chicago, so it may not be totally his fault. He might get another opportunity there. But Scott needs something like that to sort of get him into, get him a couple wins.
I mean, this is, another team, Jacksonville, maybe they're packing it in and they're saying, hey, we want to see what we have. We know what we have in Travis Etienne. Let's see what we have in Bigsby. So that could be the saving grace there for Scott. But, yeah, just that running back room is a mess now with White now. I think Todd Bowles came out and said they're viewing it as a 3-headed monster now. So that's not good for that for Scott. But 2 and 4, definitely not out of it yet, and definitely has talented players that could carry him to many fantasy wins going forward. Let's go to our next matchup. That is going to be your matchup here. So the Orchard Beach Ovaries goes to 4 and 2, 122.46 to 99.82. You now both are 4 and 2. So let's start with Sarah's team. Jalen Hurts, great day. 21 points, 16 for 25, 264, 2 touchdowns against a tough defense. Runs the ball for 14 times, which you like to see as well. Dave Montgomery got a new contract. 12 carries, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Really, the most unsexy running back probably drafted. Him and White kind of around that mix, at least preseason-wise, but number 6 running back now, and he gets looks, a touchdown in every single game thus far. Chase Brown, as you mentioned, you traded him away. Looks like he has that job. 10 carries, 53 yards, and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb, just that you like the targets, but that Dallas offense is just bad. Just bad.
It's bad.
And 7 for 14, 89 yards. I don't think he has 2 touchdowns on the season. Okay, I would not have guessed that. Stephon Diggs, 6 for 7, 77 yards and a touchdown. Kind of that Keenan Allen role there in Houston. Not the downfield guy anymore. Not really but in the red zone, it seems like C.J. Stroud looks for him, gets in the end zone. George Pickens, he's hoping for a quarterback change. 3 for 8, 53 yards. Cole Kmet, 5 for 5, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns on the day. Dontayvius Wicks, 1 for 3, 9 yards. McPherson, 5 points, and the Jets with 2. Looking at her bench, you got Baker Mayfield here, 25, points. So that's someone you try to move to one of these quarterback-hungry teams. Devin Achane on bye and out. Tajay Spears looks like he's lost that, that kind of timeshare with Tony Pollard. McConkey, 8 targets, 43 yards, and Evan Ingram, 10 for 10, 102 yards. So definitely someone you might be able to play there. We talk about playing 2 tight ends, one in the flex, one in the tight end position. This might be a scenario where you do that. Maybe with Achane coming back, you're playing Chase Brown there, but overall solid week. Now 4-2. I guess my biggest question is George Pickens. Has only gone over 10 points twice. What's his ceiling if they do move to Russell Wilson? Like, is he now a top 20 guy, or is it more of the same?
Maybe top 24. I could see it. The thing that's really interesting about him is, like, he's getting the targets. He's got 7 or more targets in all but one game. So, like, he's out there. He's doing the things. Just Fields is not really hitting him very much. 3 for 8 this week, and 3 for 7 the week before. Not the efficient games for Pickens that you would hope. Obviously has a lot of talent. Obviously is the main pass catcher there between him and Freiermuth. I could see top 24. I think certainly if you're Sarah, you're hoping for the quarterback change. Man, he would be a great number 3 behind Lamb and Diggs. The wide receiver situation for Sarah looks pretty good right now. For Diggs, at least, he's going to be the number 1 in Houston. One of the most high-powered offenses in the league with a great quarterback,
and
good
Nico
quarterback.
Collins out. Yeah.
Nico Collins placed on IR, so he'll miss at least 3 more weeks in addition to this one that he just missed. So, Tank Dell, I believe, is also still hurt, right? I'm not sure when he's coming back. But, we certainly thought that offense was capable of sustaining at least 2, if not 3, solid wide receivers.
He played in this one.
He did, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, look, the quarterback situation, Hurts and Baker, theoretically, you could play the matchups, dare I say. Baker, we don't talk about him a lot. He's the number 2 quarterback in fantasy, which is the craziest thing, I think. Goes up against a Ravens defense that can be beat through the air a little bit, more so than on the ground. It could be more of a Baker day. They could be behind in that game. You never know.
And it's not like he's not familiar with us.
That's right. Has played against us plenty with the Browns. So, lots of good things to like. Chase Brown, hey, I really liked him. I didn't want to trade him. I needed a wide receiver, and Sarah had a lot of good ones, so I was able to pluck Shakir from her. But hey, Chase Brown, he started to kind of take over that job last week, and then this week clearly just 10 rushes, but looked very good with those. Got into the end zone, involved in the passing game. He seems to now 3 straight games of 13 or more fantasy points. So it certainly looks like Brown is going to be a startable commodity. And man, you mentioned it, David Montgomery, the number 6 running back in fantasy. I was sitting here watching the game. I had the red zone on, I think, with Daniel, and I said to him, I think maybe Gibbs got it to the 1 and went down, or somebody got it to the 1, and I said, oh shit, that's the end of it for me. I said it's so obvious. Not only was it obvious that Montgomery was going to get that chance, but that if he got it, he was going to get in, and he got in easily. So, 2 more touchdowns
like
for him.
The Derrick Henry kind of thing. It's like when he's on the field, he's getting the ball, and they
Yeah.
can't stop him anyway. I mean, look at the snap percentage. I know they didn't play the majority of the fourth quarter, but
30 to 40.
31, 31 snaps, and he does all this. He gets two
Yeah.
touchdowns. It's like it's crazy, and it's going to be more competitive. So you're going to see that snap count go closer to 50%.
Yep.
But yeah, he's just amazing.
Great
I don't know.
offense.
Yeah.
Touchdown in all of his games this year. So, like we've been saying with a lot of these other 4-2 teams, there's a reason these teams are 4-2. They're really good, and this is all done with Devin Achan missing this game. He was out. That situation is fraught right now in Miami
Yeah.
for everybody. As long if he comes back, if Sarah maintains this, gets looking like a potential playoff team, hopefully at the end of the year she gets a healthy Achan, a healthy Tua, and this offense becomes the elite fantasy offense that we know that they can be with healthy players. So lots of things to like for Sarah. She gets her fourth win of the season and moves to 4-2.
You just to close it out here, but when Tua does come back, you're just like watching every snap and just saying, "Oh God, if he gets hit, is that going to be the end of it for the year?"
Yeah.
The concussion history with him, it could just take one and he's done. So, it's kind of a risky play. Achane just looks different when Tua's back there. So I agree with that there. But
And
let's
then
go. Yeah,
one last thing, just because I noticed it. One guy to name is Ty Chandler here.
yeah,
Aaron Jones left this game. Certainly, the Vikings signed Cam Akers, I believe, is what we saw. Um, which is interesting. Do they go out and sign a guy like Akers because maybe the Aaron Jones injury there's more to it? Does that all of a sudden put Chandler in a starting role for multiple weeks for the Vikings? That could be fantasy gold. Certainly, I think always viewed as potentially one of the better handcuffs in fantasy. So the
mm.
fact that he could be relevant is helpful as we enter the or continue on with the bye weeks.
Well, really, just one of the true handcuffs. I would say it's like
Yeah.
if Jones is out, it's going to be him. So
Yeah.
definitely something to look out for. But let's go over to your side here. 99.82 Westminster Warbirds 4-2. Joe Burrow has a nice day. Had that really long run. It was kind of crazy. I don't think really. Well, the Giants definitely didn't expect it because there was no one within 30 yards of them. Does score a rushing touchdown there, 208 yards. Bucky Irving seems to. I mean, him and I think it's Sean Tucker is the other one. 14 carries, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Chua Hubbard, 18 carries, 92 yards, 5 or 6 and 11 yards. Josh Downs, nice play there, 7 for 9, 66 yards and a touchdown. Looks like a different player when Joe Flacco's out there. Calvin Ridley, oh my God, talk about bad offenses. This Tennessee offense, 8 targets, 0 catches. And on Twitter I saw, or X, whatever, I saw a highlight of his 8 targets. They're like, here are all 8 of Calvin Ridley's targets. None of them were close. Like, they were all overthrown balls. So, quarterback issues there in Tennessee. They probably had to go to Mason Rudolph at some point because Will Levis just looks awful. But you do get A.J. Brown back. 6 for 9, 116 yards and a touchdown. Pat Fryermuth, nothing really doing here. 2 for 3, 16 yards. Shakir, your new trade acquisition, nothing really doing at all. 2 for 2, 19. Tyler Bass, weird game where it was like kind of windy, stuff like that. Only 3 points. And Denver has 3 points as well. Looking at your bench, you have bye weeks. I mean, it happens. Jonathan Brooks still on the PUP list. James Cook was a late scratch. Oh my gosh, what's his name? Kyron Williams, on a bye. Juju on a bye, and Jalen Waddle on a bye as well. My question for you is, Chua Hubbard, how has he done enough to really have that role when Jonathan Brooks now is going to be coming back here? The practice window has opened, so we are at the precipice of seeing his first game action. Still has 21 days, but has he done enough to really, have that 60 to 70% snap share with Jonathan Brooks coming back?
That's the $1 million question, and the question that I don't really know that I want to know the answer to. I mean, just based on statistics, yes. I mean, this Carolina Panthers offense isn't exactly lighting the world on fire, but Chuba Hubbard is the number 7 running back in fantasy right now. So, yes, 18 carries, 92 yards, involved in the passing game, does everything except for getting to the end zone in this one. So, I'm a little bit afraid to find out. It's going to be one of these things where I'm starting Hubbard until I have reason to believe that Brooks is going to be the guy.
Yeah.
It could end up very badly in a timeshare, in which case I'm going to really regret trading Chase Brown away for what is now a number 2 wide receiver for the Bills. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I thought it was going to be a wise strategy that Brooks drafting him was going to be I'll have Hubbard until Brooks is there, and then he's clearly the number 1, but that could not happen. I've got good running backs on this team already with Kyron Williams and James Cook. So as long as Cook is healthy, it could be a situation where I'm able to maybe get away from those running backs, especially if Bucky Irving becomes, a thing, continues to be a thing, and that's not the 3-headed backfield that Todd Bowles says it's going to be. So I have some options here. It's just a question of what's going to be starting in my flex. Am I going to be able to rely on the very volatile wide receiver core that I've got? You can look at every wide receiver on this team and see that there have been ups and downs and changes in circumstances for all these guys. So the flex spot is going to be a critical one for me moving forward, and is dependent on a lot of things. Smith-Schuster, can he be, is he going to be one of the better waiver wire acquisitions of the year if he does turn into 75% of what Rashee Rice was? Is Waddle going to get Tua back? Is A.J. Brown going to stay healthy? Is Calvin Ridley going to be on the waiver wire next week? Is Josh Downs going to struggle with Anthony Richardson? So a lot of question marks at the wide receiver position for me. And then Shakir we talked about. So I don't know. A lot to be determined.
I feel like I'm kind of we'll get to my team, but I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as you as well with McCaffrey and Jordan Mason. It's like when they come back, how's that split going to be? Because it sounds like they're not going to give McCaffrey a full workload. So I could be really in trouble there as well. But just the last thing on Jonathan Brooks, I think it was the only running back drafted in the first round. So, or it was early second. So it's kind of like one of those things with, Jacksonville, things like that, where it's just like they're not going anywhere this year. They want to see what they have. So maybe Brooks just takes the job away, and Hubbard just becomes the handcuff. That would be the best case scenario for you, is that Brooks gets 20 carries a game, but that remains to be seen.
Also, game script could become a factor. Like if you've got a split backfield with a team that's 1-5 playing from behind most of the time, that's really not good. So
but again, 4-2, you lose this one. Like we were looking at, you had a lot of people on bye, and James Cook was a late scratch, so you have a lot of talent coming back. So you'll have at least some healthy decisions to make in terms of who you're going to play.
Yeah, week 5 and week 6 were my bye hells. I had a very early season, back-to-back weeks of bye situations, and Hawkinson potentially coming back is also something that could benefit me. Freiermuth has been actually a little bit, kind of decent, like number 9 tight end. I think I drafted him I think I was the last team to take a tight end in the draft, so he's done admirably enough. But Hawkinson, hopefully, with as good as that, what's his name? Darnold has looked, hoping that could be, something good for me.
Okay, let's go to our next matchup. That's going to be my matchup. I go to 2-4, the Union Bridge Barracudas. 100.36 to 97.28. Alex's Owings Mills Ogres go to 1-5 on the season. Starting with my squad, Jane Daniels, probably right now, rookie of the year. 24 35, 269, 2 touchdowns. Does run a little bit. I was saying before the game, I was like, there's no better defense to be able to handle Jaden Daniels than Baltimore because they see Lamar Jackson in practice every day. So, 20 points against a defense like that, I would say, is respectable enough. Jordan Mason goes out of this one with a basically a shoulder stinger, 9 carries, 73 yards. Does look to be day to day, so that's good news for me. Tony Pollard, another one of these like mid-round running backs. It's kind of been pretty good. Is running back 19, but already has his bye, so that affects his numbers. 17 carries, 93 yards, and a touchdown. Chris Olave goes out of this one with a concussion very early, with a negative 1 point. With the way that game went, I would have loved to see him in there just because of junk time and everything like that. Mike Evans, 2 for 6, 34 yards. I mean, I'm starting him, but that's just very disappointing with Tampa Bay scoring 51 points. Deontay Johnson, though, 6 for 10, 78 yards and a touchdown. Like you were talking about negative game script with Carolina, this is only beneficial for me because if he's getting 10 targets a game, he's the best pass catcher on that team. And it seems like Dalton looks for him early and often. Trey McBride, 8 for 8, 96 yards. So he's finally starting to get it going. Number 6 tight end on the season. Rico Dowdle, 5 for 25, 5 for 6, 30 yards, was actually saved my week is when Cooper Rush and all the Cowboy backups came in. For some reason, Rico Dowdle was still in, and he caught a ball, which got me he ran for like 10 yards and then caught one, which really got me my win. Out of Dallas, they're saying that they need to get him the ball more, which I'm totally happy with. He is a flex play if his usage continues to go up. McLaughlin scores 8 points, and New Orleans scores 4 points, even though giving up almost 600 yards of offense, but did have 3 picks and a punt return, which helped their cause. Brock Purdy, 18 for 28, 255, 3 touchdowns. I am looking for suitors, please, anyone, that maybe some of these quarterback-needy teams. He is on the trade block for sure. I had Neighbors out of this one. Quentin Johnson did nothing with that, but what's the biggest question here for my team? I don't want to lead you in a direction. What do you think the biggest thing on my team is right now, at least question mark wise?
Well, you mentioned it just a few minutes ago, was the 49ers situation here. Exactly what we just talked about a minute ago. And, McCaffrey, what are they saying? Is it like week 9-ish?
Well,
where he'll be back, maybe?
Week 9 is their bye. So I would, if they're saying that, I could see him playing week 10. Yeah.
Well, in the short term, the big question is, can you kind of be close enough to 500 and get a couple wins prior to McCaffrey coming back so that you're still in this thing by the time that happens? With Olave injured, looking like he's going to miss a few, concussion protocol.
Well,
so
he's
not
going to miss
play
this week.
Thursday.
Yeah.
He's not going to play this week. So, as long as he comes back, as long as Neighbors comes back from his concussion issue, I think you've got enough firepower to win a few games here. It's just you got to get it done. And this was like a huge win for you. 1-5 versus 2-4 made a big difference for you right now. So I would say it'd have to be the 49ers running back situation.
Yeah. I mean, if McCaffrey plays, you got to start him. I mean, it goes back to the old adage, start your studs. You have the flex position here, which is probably where Jordan Mason, Rico Dowdle, and I'd even put Mostert in there. He had involvement there, so that's something to keep an eye on. I'd probably want to see how it shakes out with McCaffrey first before I started Jordan Mason if he did come back. Just because I'm more sure of the Mostert situation and the Rico Dowdle situation. But it's something that I hope he doesn't ramp up because that could really spell disaster if, McCaffrey scores 12 and then, Jordan Mason gets 12 carries that could have went to McCaffrey that could really hurt me in the long run. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find other things to say about this team. I like you're unremarkable, Adam, right now. Like not in a good way or a bad way. Like I don't see a whole lot else that's like super remarkable
I
here
don't have any
in one way or
decisions,
the other.
really. Like, I'm playing who I'm
You
playing.
don't. I mean, look, McBride 8 for 8. He has his best, well, his second best game of the season fantasy wise, but still hasn't gotten into the end zone. Like
Now
that's a question mark for
he
me.
did get in the end zone. He recovered a fumble in the end zone actually, so that actually counted for me.
Oh,
That
oh,
was the week
interesting.
two.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, he has only played 5 games, missed a game earlier in the year, but does not have a receiving touchdown yet, despite a good between 6 and 9 targets in every game that he's played. So that's going to change. You got to think that he's going to start to have a few games that are more like this one, I guess, with the touchdown. More 13 to 15 point games as opposed to what he's been earlier in the season. More in the 4 to 8 point range. So I don't know. I mean, look, Pollard's getting the job done for you. That situation, in the draft, there were some questions about Pollard and how much his Spears going to take away. He, despite being on a bad offense, he's still getting the job done enough that he's, got double digit points in 4 of his first 5 games, 3 touchdowns for Pollard. So he does seem to have, a pretty good situation there as the bell cow in Tennessee. So you've got enough here. You've got enough talent on this team. As long as these guys with concussions can come back, you should be, in line to get a couple more wins. Not sure what your matchups coming up are or how the buys shape out, but you're definitely the next couple weeks are really critical for your team.
Yeah, I totally agree. But let's go over to Alex here. Really loses by 3. Goes to 1-5. Really desperate situation for Alex. CJ Stroud, you drafted him as a top 4 quarterback, and he's quarterback number 10. 18 points, does throw 3 touchdowns, does throw an interception, but you need him to do better with the draft capital that was spent. Jahmyr Gibbs is just like overshadowed, right, by David
Yep.
Montgomery. And we kind of talked about this in the preseason. It's like, how was that going to shake out? Gibbs has the talent, but they don't seem to want to give him that bell cow role. And, with the extension of David Montgomery, that's not changing anytime soon. So it's definitely not changing this year. 12 carries, 63 yards. Really used outside the 20s, it seems. And then David Montgomery comes in and steals all the red zone work. Antonio Gibson, 13 carries, 19 yards. Just a guy. With Ramondre Stevenson being out, just really nothing happening there. Darnell Mooney, he's been kind of pretty good. Wide receiver 18, but only goes 3 for 5, 38 yards here. DJ Moore, 4 for 5, 20 yards. High scoring game, but doesn't get in the end zone. Doesn't get the targets in this one. Zay Flowers really started off the day really well. 9 for 9, 132. But really was not, I don't think he got a target in the second half. So very boomer bust, it seems, for Zay Flowers. He's obviously the number 1 target for Lamar Jackson, but you just want to see end zone usage, red zone usage, things like that to really skyrocket his value. Dallas Goedert was ruled out of this one, so I don't know if Alex didn't see that. Well, he did have 1 reception, so he did play in the game, but was ruled out early. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4 for 4, 37 yards and a touchdown. Tucker seems to have figured it out, 14 points, and Philadelphia's defense scores 9. Looking at his bench, does have Kareem Hunt here on a bye, so it looks like he's going to be the startable option, the second running back there. And does have Tank Dell. He's definitely worth considering starting with Nico Collins being out. So that's my question for you is, with Nico Collins being out, and assuming you want to get Tank Dell in this lineup, how are you getting him in this lineup? Or are you?
Well, he's going to be the flex. You're starting Gibbs, and you've got Nick Chubb coming back on IR for this squad. So Now, whether you're going to feel comfortable starting him right away if he plays, without Jerome Ford, maybe. Uh, I mean, at this point, you kind of, what difference does it make? What 1 and 5? If you've got a chance to get Nick Chubb in your lineup, I think you do, and you get Tank Dell in the flex spot. DJ Moore struggling a bit in this one. Uh, like if you look at his schedule though, like the Bears' schedule with Caleb Williams playing a lot better, it's hard to take him out of the lineup. They've got he's got to bye this coming week, so that makes it easy that you're not playing more. But then he's got Washington, Arizona, New England, Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, all green matchups for the next 6 or so weeks for DJ Moore. With Caleb Williams playing better, maybe that gives you a little bit of hope. Um, I mean, Darnell Mooney is probably a little bit easy to get away. It's so hard. I don't know.
Right. Right.
The Mooney Ray McLeod situation is like the most unexpected fantasy relevance for receivers anywhere. So I I don't know. It's tough, but you definitely have to get Dell in there while Nico Collins is out.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easy now just because DJ Moore is on a bye, so you get him in there. Then you get Kareem Hunt in there for Antonio Gibson. I think you have to play him if he is active. Just being the number one option in the running back position on that Kansas City offense, you got to play him there. But at
Yep.
1 and 5, I think you can drop Dallas's defense. I think I've seen enough out of them. They are not the same as last year. They had two negatives this year thus far. Just not turning the ball, not getting turnovers like they did. They had a ton of pick sixes last year. Just, I think they are droppable. Maybe pick up one of these. Pick up one of these guys that have like just picking up a guy that has a chance. You know what I mean of expanding their roles. But yeah. So 1 and 5.
Do want to bring up
You know,
an interesting thing here, and it is more of just an observation about the draft board, kind of going back and looking. So running backs in the draft go McCaffrey, Bijan, Brees Hall, Barkley, Taylor, Pacheco, Henry. Generally, barring injuries, those guys have been pretty good.
suitable.
Most of those guys. And then Kyron Williams, obviously, been very good. The next guy off the board. Alex then with pick 2.5 takes Gibbs. Gibbs in the second round is the number 12 running back. ETN is the next running back taken. He's number 33. Jacobs, the next one, number 19. Achan, number 30. Rashad White, back end of the second round, number 45. The next running back that is a pretty dead zone of mid to late second round running backs that have not returned value. But then you keep going into the late third, James Cook, to me, number 8. You like that. Kamara in round 4, number 2. Mid round 4, Kenneth Walker, number 15, but has been hurt. The games that he's played, I think he's been better than that on a per game basis. Mixon, number 25, again, missed time because of injury, but when he's been on the field, he's been electric. And then James Conner, number 13. So just very interesting to see that those mid to second round guys have been vastly outperformed by third and fourth round guys. You actually even go beyond that into the fifth. Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift. So if you're looking at this draft board, just observing that the running backs in round 2 have been awful.
Yeah. Okay, so last question for you on Alex's team. Rest of the season, who do you want? Kenneth Walker or Gibbs? It's close.
Kenneth Walker, gambling that he stays healthy.
Yeah.
But that's a gamble. It's tough.
But it just goes to show you that being the lead back, no matter what talent level you are, is so important. Because Gibbs is talented. He has all the talent in the world, but he has David Montgomery in front of him. Or at least time sharing with him. I mean, what was Gibbs? 54%? So, you can be all talented in the world, but if you're not on the field, you're not scoring points. So
upside is limited. Yep, ceiling is limited.
Upside is limited for sure. But let's go to our last matchup, our lowest scoring matchup of the week. that's going to be the Finksburg Freaks getting their third win, 93.14. To Columbia Clown College, now 1-5, 78.10, our low of the week. So, Mike, we'll be seeing you very soon.
Is it low of the year? Is it the low of the year?
I'm gonna have to go to stats and research for that. But
I'll look at that. You talk.
Okay.
I'll look.
Starts Caleb Williams. Had Pat Mahomes on bye, but 23 of 29, 226, and 4 touchdowns. Does run the ball for 56 yards as well. Breece Hall has a nice game here. 18 carries, 113 yards, 5 for 6, 56 yards to the air. Travis Etienne, who we've been talking about, 3 carries, -1 yards for negative points. Alarm bells there in Jacksonville, as we've talked about with the running back position. It's just, who can you trust there? DK Metcalf, you like the targets, but only 48 yards in this one. Brian Thompson Jr., 3 for 6, 27 yards. Just an off game. Think better days for him. T. Higgins, 7 for 7, 77 yards on this one, and that low scoring game against the Giants. Tyler Kraft, 2 for 4, 13 yards. James Polk, he decides to throw in there, 1 for 4, 4 yards. Aubrey scores 13, and San Francisco scores 7. Looking at his bench, Madsen again, 14 for 33, but does get in the end zone and is involved in the passing game. And the zombie corpse of Mark Andrews now, 3 for 4, 66 yards and a touchdown. Maybe he's starting to return investment. Maybe he's starting to get back on track. Only 4 targets, but at least they're looking for him. It's just hard to trust with his track record this season thus far, if you can throw him in there. But I think you'd rather have the upside of Andrews more than Tyler Kraft going forward.
Are you throwing it to me?
Sure. If you're still looking, I can keep talking.
No. Scott had a 74 in week 2 or 3, so
Okay.
Scott's the lowest, but second lowest for.
Okay, so my question is, I guess, is Mark Andrews has his best game of the season. Is he safe to start playing now?
Start playing who?
Mark Andrews.
Oh, we're talking about. Oh, sorry. I'm so focused on Mike's team. I'm looking at Mike's lineup. Yeah, I think so. 2 back-to-back decent games for Andrews. I think he is safe. Although Kraft, down week here, but has been pretty good in previous weeks. It might be a matchup thing for a little while, but I think I would tend to lean on. I think I tend to lean Andrews there for right now.
There's not
Green
as many
Bay
weapons.
just has so many weapons.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Exactly. Well, I mean the Ravens too as well.
Yeah, but
to some degree,
Green Bay has 4 wide receivers that get the ball. Like the Ravens don't have that.
Yeah,
they have
true.
1, and then Rashad Bateman sometimes. But
yes, yeah, I think so. I think that's the way to go. I mean, man, lucky win for Tom here to go to 3-3, the second lowest, I believe, right? Second lowest scoring team of the week, beating the lowest scoring team of the week. So a pretty fortunate win. Concerns for Travis Etienne, obviously. Just, man, what a struggle fest that's been. I mean, I feel like part of it's injury related. Part of it is, just like last week, his yards per carry was way down. Part of it is just Jacksonville sucks.
Yeah.
They're really, really bad. They're going to get you mentioned probably a coaching change at some point soon. So maybe that helps to salvage Etienne's season. Maybe the new coaching staff decides that, Etienne needs more carries, needs more snap percentage. He hasn't been over 72% yet this year.
Honestly, what you're hoping for with Travis is a change of scenery. You're hoping that we've had trades flying this today, really.
Yeah.
You're hoping that he goes to somewhere like, I don't know, like the Raiders. I don't know if the Raiders are really going to trade, but somewhere where he can, get 70% of the snaps, where there's no one really behind him to really push him for carries. So, because right now you don't know who it's going to be. You don't know if it's going to be Tank Bigsby or Ernest Johnson. You have no idea who is going to be right now. And they're struggling in offense, so they're going to be behind.
Yeah. For sure. And, struggling offense is kind of the thing that I'm looking at across the board with some of these players here. ETN, Metcalf, Brian Thomas, obviously electric rookie, struggled this week. Jacksonville, um, Jalen Polk gets the start here with New England. So a lot of guys on here. There's no one that really plays for a dynamic, super heavy offense. Maybe the Jets become that now, especially with Devontae Adams. Does that help or hurt Brees Hall? I would say it might help him. It might open
Yeah,
up the field a little bit more.
that's what I'm thinking.
Um,
Yeah.
so, potentially that's good, and potentially Caleb Williams, if he continues to play like he did this week, that's potentially positive. But just still a lot of question marks on this team for me. Not a whole ton of bench depth. Gus Edwards going to be droppable. He's on IR. Xavier Worthy, we'll see. Like, can he become a legitimate number two for the Chiefs there? We've talked about the struggles of Pat Mahomes when it comes to fantasy this year. We'll see if that offense can support, Smith-Schuster and Worthy enough to be, reliable. Pierce is probably done now that Downs is back. Um, Madison, that is the one bright spot on this bench for me right now. Madison, Zamir White's been so awful there with the Raiders. Of course, losing a big receiving threat, maybe they're able to.
Maybe they're more ground and pound now. I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, 14 for 33 is not great. Does get into the end zone and is active in the passing game, but that running efficiency isn't exactly blowing me away. And that's something we've always seen with Madison is not a very efficient runner. 4 of his 6 games, he's under 3 yards a carry, 2.5 yards a carry. So uh, doesn't inspire confidence there, but at least he did get into the end zone in this game. So I don't know. I think thinking about how I drafted their or rated the teams at the beginning after the draft to what we see now, I think maybe Tom's team might be the biggest faller for me. Based on, I think I gave him an A minus, maybe if I'm remembering correctly. He definitely had an A of some sort.
I could
Was
probably
one
look
of,
it
I
up
think,
in a
three
second.
three teams perhaps that had an A. But yeah, just not seeing it right now, and it starts with ETN, um, and just goes down from there.
Yeah, I mean, my final question for Tom's team. So Caleb Williams is on bye in week 7. Comes back week 8 against Washington. Patrick Mahomes plays. Um, plays Vegas in week 8. Who are you starting?
I mean,
Because Caleb Williams, that's a plus matchup against Washington.
I think it's probably Caleb Williams.
Wow.
I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
right? Like,
There's just more upside, and right now Tom needs upside. Like he seems to have found his groove. You would think that he's going to have 2 weeks to prepare for Washington. That he's going to be well informed. They can't stop the pass as we saw with Lamar. I, I mean, it's not inconceivable that we see a 30-point game out of Caleb Williams against Washington, which I don't know if we're going to see a 20-point game out of Mahomes against the Raiders because they're going to be ahead, and that's going to limit his opportunities to score points.
yeah.
All right, so let's go over to Tom, or not Tom's. Let's go over to Mike's squad. Really bye week woes, I would say, for this squad. Let's start off with Jared Goff, 18 for 25, 325, 3 touchdowns. Perfectly good day for him in that big win against Dallas. Austin Eckler, 9 carries for 21 yards, 4 for 5, 47 yards. That's kind of what he is, 8 to 10, no touchdowns, but involved in the passing game. A fine flex player, I would say. James Conner really, falls down here, has the second worst game of the season, 7 for 24. Does lose a fumble in this one as well. Rashad Bateman, 4 for 4, 71 yards. Bye week fill-in for Mike. Marvin Harrison Jr. goes out of this one with a concussion. 0 for 2 for a 0 point day there, so that really hurt Mike there. Christian Kirk, 3 for 6, 39 yards. Christian Kirk, disappointing. Like, what the heck? It's just like everybody on this Jacksonville offense has just been disappointing. There hasn't, other than Brian Thompson Jr., everyone's kind of been disappointing. He's now the 43rd ranked wide receiver in fantasy football. Isaiah Likely, the big spend of week 1, nothing. 2 for 4, 27 yards. Darius Slayton, with Malik Neighbors being out, does get 11 targets here, but only for 57 yards. Q scores 11, and Seattle scores 1 point on the day. Looking on his bench, though, Aaron Jones, Tyreek Hill, Jordan Addison, and Travis Kelce. So he does have help on the way. Just, is it too little too late now going to 1-5 on the season, with his only win being against me, where he scored 150 points?
Probably. I don't think Mike liked me calling his running backs old at the beginning of the year and injury prone, but you've got Connor leaving this game early with an ankle injury, and you've got Jones missing this week after. Wait, they had a bye? Is that what? Yeah, they had a bye.
Yeah.
But he's not a lock to play apparently in week 7 at this point in time. So, dealing with what is he dealing with? He's dealing with a hip injury, seen on the practice field, but still, that was always the concern with these two guys, Connor and Jones, is their age, and is that going to potentially cause some issues? Lost Marvin Harrison in this game with 0 points. So between injuries, bye weeks, this was just you can see why the point total was what it was for Mike. Not a great time to suffer injuries and bye weeks when you've just got one win on the season. Now the number 12 team in the league. It's going to be potentially a tough sledding for Mike the rest of the way here.
Yeah.
When you're starting guys like Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely, those are two Ravens that I wouldn't recommend getting in your lineup. But I guess desperate times call for desperate actions.
And just kind of thinking about this for a second, going back to week 1, he spends all this money on Isaiah Likely, right?
Yeah.
Well, he was the guy that spent all the money, right? Let's make sure.
Yeah, $69. Yep.
He has Travis Kelce. Why would you do that? Even if you thought Likely was going to be a focal point of this offense, are you really starting 2 tight ends?
Nope.
I don't know. Yeah, so it's just something to just kind of think about. Yeah, but everything you said is, Austin Eckler is involved in this game just because Brian Robinson was out of this one. James Conner,
right.
When the Arizona offense struggles, he's going to struggle. Getting up there in age as well. And you just have too many like boom or bust kind of people. Christian Kirk can go off, but then he has these games. Marvin Harrison Jr., he has the talent, but can Kyler get him the ball consistently? Now has a concussion. So, at 1-5, and you still have questions with Tyreek, that quarterback situation as well. Aaron Jones was spotted on the practice field Monday, so that's good news for Mike. But, he's often injured. Can he afford a long-term injury with Aaron Jones if he has a setback? Probably not at 1-5. And, it's just tough sailing, trying to win, 7 straight games with so many question marks.
For sure. And, not a lot of, at this point you're playing the healthy guys, Tyreek Hill, you're going to have to start him and hope that Tua comes back soon-ish. But I don't know. It may be a lost cause at this point, unfortunately for Mike. Just not enough depth here to weather the storm. Like you said, some players like Kirk who are on not great offenses, some guys that are not the featured weapon on their team, just tough stuff. I guess you're starting Goff for the foreseeable. Prescott just looks not very good. Like they paid him all that money, 3 points. Boy, Just
Yeah.
rough.
Okay, so 1-5 on the season for Mike, but let's just take a brief peek at next week, see what the matchups are. I'm against Scott, the battle of the 2-4s. The Westminster Warbirds are against the Carlisle Cheddar, so battle of 4-2s. Sarah is up against Dustin, battle of 4-2 and 3-3. Charlie is against Mike, who we just talked about a little bit. Tom is against Josh here, so 3-3 versus 4-2. And Alex is against Brian, 4-2 versus 1-5. So some interesting things there to shake up the standings. You know, maybe some of these 1-5 teams can play some spoilers to one of these 4-2 teams. Can happen. Anything can happen in fantasy each and every week. But again, as always, we thank you for listening and commenting and all these things. And we will see you next week for the Week 7 results. Anything else?
Bears and Cowboys on bye. Bears and Cowboys, the
Bears
only
and
two
Cowboys
teams
on
on
bye.
bye.
All
Off
right.
the top of my head, CD Lamb against Dustin. So that's
Well,
potentially
Dustin also
good
had
for
Keenan Allen
Dustin.
as well. So he's
That's right. So actually, Dustin has quite a few Bears: Dunze, Keenan Allen, and Swift.
yeah,
Right.
Swift.
So some stud players missing in that matchup between Sarah and Dustin for sure.
Okay. Well, we will see you all next week, and have a good weekend, or have a good week, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening and your support. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify.